On behalf of SuperValu, I would like to thank you all for joining us this morning here at the Botany Department at Trinity College Dublin for the launch of our Save the Bees programme in partnership with the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan and Minister Humphreys Department. I'd like to introduce you to SuperValu's Managing Director, Ian Allen.
Good morning, everybody. And I too want to welcome you all here to Trinity College for the launch of our Save the Bees programme in partnership with the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan. I'm really thrilled to be here. It's a really exciting day for us. So look, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Minister Humphreys for her and her department's continued commitment to sustainability and biodiversity, and in particular through the work that you do through the National Biodiversity Action Plan and through the support you give to TidyTowns groups across the country. And as part of our work in SuperValu TidyTowns, I have seen the positive impact and I'm inspired by the community actions that take place in our villages, in our towns, in our environment, and crucially, the work we do on biodiversity. And I'm always impressed by the many thousands of volunteers and our retail partners in SuperValu who, across the country, develop green areas, they rewild space and nurture biodiversity through the various Tidy Towns committees. None of this would be possible without the ongoing continued investment by the Minister, and I would like to acknowledge the dedication that she shows in this regard here today. Now, as a community retailer, sustainability is very much part of our SuperValu DNA. That's why I'm particularly delighted to be here to launch the Save the Bees programme today. And while many of us want to play our part on sustainability and biodiversity, sometimes it can be somewhat difficult to understand where we can start. And indeed, research has shown us that if we engage young people in primary schools, we can empower them to take informed conservation actions which will stick with them and last a lifetime and really impact on generations to come. Now, SuperValu, through its Save the Bees campaign, is on a mission to help nurture an environment to eradicate the threat to bees and bring communities together while doing so to create an awareness and to take action. Now, with the help of our Pollinator Pack, we want to raise awareness and to show the importance of bees and show how simple things can have such a real difference. When we consider that 1 out of every 3 mouthfuls of food that we consume depends on food pollinators, or that almost 90% of wild plants and 75% of leading global crops depend on animal pollination, it's essential that we inform our young people and empower them to act. All the while, in doing so, bringing teachers, parents, family members, friends on the same journey, thereby having a real wider community impact. And like us, bees are more impactful and stronger when they work together. Now, we realise the collective efforts of working together in SuperValu. That's why we are committed to doing what we can on climate action, not only through the work we will do in communities, but as a business overall. We're focusing our sustainability efforts on 3 main pillars: sourcing, our environmental impact, and community. And as part of this journey, we are already taking several steps. Now, having reduced our carbon emissions by 20% since 2014, we are committed to reaching net zero carbon by 2040. All of our distribution centres run on green electricity. 60% of our stores around the country run on green electricity. And we have over 11,000 solar panels already fitted to stores across the country. We're committed that 100% of our own brand packaging will be recyclable, reusable, or compostable by 2025. And I'm happy to say that we're already 90% along the journey here in this regard. We are signatories to the UN Global Compact and committed to sourcing sustainably and ethically. We are the greatest supporters of local and Irish, with 75% of all of our goods sourced in Ireland, supporting over 1,800 Irish suppliers. Now, these are just some of the steps that we've taken already and are taking at the moment. And as we look to the future, we recognise the effort required by us, by our retailers and by our communities. And we plan on doing all we can to invest and to support this transition so that we can make a positive impact through our stores right around the country. Now, it goes without saying that our Save the Bees campaign would not be possible without the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan and the work that Professor Jane Stout and Dr. Una Fitzpatrick are doing, both doing excellent work with researchers at the National Biodiversity Data Centre. Now, the work of the National Biodiversity Data Centre and other research centres play a key role in Ireland's response to climate change and the changing face of biodiversity. And I think we must recognise the government's efforts here and foresight they've had in investing in research to help arm Ireland's climate response. So, as we start see our environment come to life this spring, I'm thrilled and delighted to be proud to be here today to launch our Save the Bees campaign, and I look forward to seeing how this can have a real impact in the coming weeks, in the coming months, and indeed in the coming years ahead.
In our work in SuperValu, we can see every day the impact that bees have. Without pollinators, the food available on our shelves would look very different. We rely on bees for apples, pears, strawberries, blackberries, green beans, pumpkins, to name just a few. Having seen how passionate the young people of Ireland are on biodiversity, and also our TidyTowns committees, I'm really excited to see how primary school children embrace this Save the Bees campaign and the knock-on positive impact that it will have in our communities on biodiversity into the future. In creating this programme in partnership with the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan, we've learned so much from Dr. Fitzpatrick and Professor Stout about the importance of biodiversity and pollinators, and particularly our food supply. So as I welcome them to the stage to tell you about the campaign, I would like to thank them both for their collaboration.
It's great to hear about SuperValu's commitment to sustainability and to biodiversity programs. So biodiversity, it's the variety of life across habitats, all the different species of plants and animals and microorganisms that live in those habitats, and the diversity at a genetic level within those species. And biodiversity is in crisis. It's being lost, it's being degraded by human activity. So cutting, clearing, draining, other activities are causing the transformation of our landscapes to very simplified, highly managed, homogeneous landscapes. And this is happening at a global scale. So a recent global report has shown that human activity and conversion of land for human use has resulted in 3/4 of the land area of Earth being very significantly altered. In addition, 2/3 of our oceans are experiencing increasing impacts, and there's been a loss of 85% of the world's wetlands. So this is a real crisis, and this loss of habitats has been a large contributor to a loss of species. And it's now estimated that of the 8 million species that we have on this Earth, 1 million of them are threatened with extinction. So that's a million species that have taken hundreds of thousands, millions of years to evolve, at risk through the actions of humanity in just mere decades. And it's not just the complete loss of species that's a problem, it's that populations are getting smaller and smaller, and this then risks whole ecosystems. This isn't just happening elsewhere, it's happening in Ireland too. Even though we're well known for our lush green rolling hills, our biodiversity is in a poor state. 85% of our protected habitats are in unfavourable condition. And on farmland, so in our non-protected habitats, only the productive areas are prioritised. So the ditches, the streams, the pockets of woodland, the verges, the places that provide habitat level diversity are undervalued. And so this biodiversity crisis is very real. It's not just happening elsewhere, it's happening right here, right now in Ireland. In Ireland, we have 100 species of bee. Often people just think about the honeybee, but there's much more to our bee fauna than the honeybee. We have 100 species of bee. 21 of those are bumblebees, and 78 of those are solitary bee species. And unfortunately, a massive 1/3 of our native bee species are at risk of extinction. Now, drivers of bee decline in Ireland are similar to the drivers of biodiversity loss worldwide. So we're losing habitats. That means that the bees are homeless. We've got a decline in wildflowers. That means that the bees are hungry. They get their food from wildflowers. And increases in pests and diseases and use of pesticides means that the bees are sick and becoming poisoned. And on top of all of that, there's changes in the environment, climate change, other environmental changes that are causing additional stress. So why does this bee decline matter? Well, one reason that bees are really important is because whilst they're collecting nectar and pollen as food for themselves and for their offspring, they move pollen between flowers, and this allows plants to produce fruit and seeds. And a lot of those fruits and seeds are then in turn food for us, our crop species. And as Ian already mentioned, 75% of the world's leading crop species are animal pollinated. So pollinators are really important in terms of both crop production, but also in terms of global food security, in terms of nutrition and health and well-being, and they contribute to the economy. And it's important to note that this diversity of pollinators, so having lots of different species of pollinators, is really important. This increases both the quality and the quantity of crop yields. But it's not all about crops. Nearly 90% of our native wild plant species are animal pollinated. So this means that pollinators aren't just contributing to our food production, but they're contributing to the maintenance of ecosystems. And many of these pollinators also play other roles. For example, some of them are food for birds. Hoverfly larvae act as predators and also recyclers in ecosystems. So there are other benefits to conserving pollinators beyond just producing food and pollination. And of course, with these roles that bees and other pollinators play in the community, there's then all these knock-on benefits, these co-benefits in terms of addressing climate change and wider biodiversity loss, and in terms of our own health and well-being. So loss of pollinators and loss of biodiversity risks loss of all of these benefits. So we know we're in crisis. We know it's time for action. We know that biodiversity loss is occurring. It's huge implications for humanity. So we need to apply the knowledge that we've gained in researching drivers and consequences of pollinator loss and take action to address these losses before it's too late.
My name's Una Fitzpatrick, and I work in the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And within the centre, we track changes in Ireland's wildlife. So for a long time, we've been able to see that bees were declining. You know, we're watching it happening. At the same time, Jane here in Trinity and other scientists across the world were researching why it was happening. So I guess Jane and I came together and we said, we know there's a problem. You know, you can sit and watch that happening, or we can try to do something about it in Ireland. So we put together a first draft of the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan. And in producing that plan, what we always wanted to do was to try and get everyone involved. It was really very much a call to action. And you can't ask people to help unless you explain really clearly what it is you're asking them to do. So that's what we wanted to focus in within the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan. So we've been developing these evidence-based guidelines for different sectors. So what we do is we take the science and we see what will definitely work, and then we translate it into actions that people can take. And we produce these evidence-based guidelines, as I say, for different sectors. So there's one for councils, one for businesses, one for local communities, one for farmers, and so on. All these are freely available on the website pollinators.ie, along with lots of other resources that people can access, you know, if they want to get involved and help. Just want to say a wee bit about the impact that the plan has had since it was launched in 2015. Fortunately, you know, we were able to deliver the 81 actions in that first plan, thanks to the enormous support that we got from all our partners. 86% of councils across the island have now agreed to partner with the plan and take action on the public land that they manage. Parks have become pollinator friendly through the Green Flag for Parks Award. There's over 330 businesses who have committed their company to looking at within their company and seeing whether they can take actions to help declines in pollinators. There's a research project within the National Biodiversity Data Centre which is looking at farmland, and obviously farmland's incredibly important because it represents so much of the Irish landscape. This one is really important, and I often get asked which sector has had the most impact. And the honest answer is that it's local communities through the TidyTowns initiative. They've just really been incredible. There's a special pollinator award within TidyTowns, which they've totally embraced and really they've taken an inspiring range of actions to make local communities better for biodiversity, better for pollinators. We've been logging all these actions, so at the minute across the island there's over 7,000 actions that have been logged. What we've seen within the National Biodiversity Data Centre is much more people engaging with nature. And actually, since the plan was launched, we've seen a 300% increase in the number of people learning how to identify those wild pollinators and sending information to us. Also, the Irish Pollinator Research Network was established. It used to be just Jane, and now there are teams of them out there researching what to do. And that's so important because their work underpins the advice that we provide within the plan. People always ask me, you've not mentioned bees yet, are bees improving? And the honest answer is that we don't know, because what you have to do is have a plan and implement it, and you have to put that food and shelter back, which is what's happening, but then you have to give the bees time to respond. And really that's the phase that we're at the minute. We'll keep tracking changes, and hopefully we'll see increases in the number of bumblebees and the number of solitary bees in the landscape as the actions are implemented. So what it's also let us do is develop a new and more ambitious version of the Pollinator Plan for the next 5 years, so for 21 to 25. So it's new, it's more ambitious, and we're really excited to deliver that over this new phase. Lots of things that we want to do. We want to make sure everyone is taking the right action. So for us, that means, it's not necessarily about honeybees because they're not in trouble. It's the 99 wild bees that need our help. And also moving people away from certain actions like wildflower seed mixes when there are other actions that are much better for biodiversity and for pollinators. We want to expand to new sectors, hospitals, housing developments. There's lots of people who we haven't targeted yet that we want to do. We want to encourage local communities to help rare pollinators. Some amazing work going on with local communities already who are helping some really, really rare and endangered bumblebees, and we want to encourage that and expand it. We want to better track changes. We want to better explain the wider benefits that we're taking for pollinators. You help pollinators, you help biodiversity, but those actions also benefit us in terms of health and well-being, and they're also benefiting climate. We want to encourage even more involvement. I said TidyTowns were amazing, and there's 200 groups that have already entered the Special Pollinator Award, but there's lots more that haven't, so we want to try to target those over the coming years. And which brings us to Save the Bees. And we're really honoured and thrilled to be part of this initiative. And for me, there's 2 reasons why it's so important. The first one, and I think Ian touched on it, is that it empowers the next generation to know how to help. And that is so important. But I want to say something. Biodiversity is in crisis. Like it really is. Day to day, week to week, year to year, we're watching it being eroded. And what happens is that you get these new normals. So when I was growing up in the 80s, there were loads of bumblebees in our garden. I was scared to go outside the door at night because there'd be so many moths flitting around the lights. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's really scary because for my kids, their normal is different, and it's not the right normal. Biodiversity is being lost. We have to change that. So it's not enough just to empower children. We have to leave them with something to protect. So it's really important that we all take action now to change the way we manage the landscape. And the second reason why this campaign is so important is that that's what's happening in primary schools. There's 3,200 schools that are going to be targeted. If all those 3,200 make their school more pollinator friendly, that's a pit stop. That's another pit stop for pollinators right across our landscape. And together with everything else, the positive impact of that is huge. I always say, lots of small actions taken together can begin to solve big problems, and that is true. But Save the Bees isn't a small action. It's a significant action in this, and we're, as I say, really honoured and delighted to be part of it. So, thank you.